The proximity alarms screamed through the bridge of the Sovereignty's Pride, and High Commander Vel'thran's 4 eyes snapped to the tactical display. The human vessel had appeared 3 million kilometers off their starboard bow, exactly where the gravitational calculations said nothing should exist. The ship hung in the void like a silver dagger, its hull reflecting the distant starlight in ways that made Vel'thran's primary eyes ache. "Impossible," breathed Navigator Quillix from her station. The spatial distortion readings just before emergence registered 12,000 terajoules. That's planetary defense grid numbers. Vel'thran's breathing spiracles flared. In his 200 cycles of military service, he'd learned to trust impossible readings about as much as he trusted a Kresh merchant's smile. He studied the vessel on the display, his tactical mind cataloging details with practiced efficiency. The ship measured perhaps 300 meters from bow to stern, compact by galactic standards. Its design spoke of aggressive engineering all angles and purpose, with weapon emplacements that seemed to flow organically from the hull rather than being mounted as afterthoughts. "Full sensor sweep," he ordered, his voice carrying the harmonic undertones that marked him as clan-born nobility. "I want to know everything about that ship. Power signatures, armament, crew complement, engine specifications. Everything." The sensor operator, a young Trillian named Meshach, worked his console with all 6 of his manipulator tentacles moving in synchronized precision. "Sir, the reading's unusual. The vessel is broadcasting human identification codes. Single ship, designation Oost Midnight Runner, registry TF 887-2247. The power signature is consistent with a Class 3 fusion torch drive, but the energy distribution patterns suggest massive capacitor banks," and he paused, his tentacles freezing mid-motion. "Sir, the quantum signatures indicate active neural interface technology. Military grade." Vel'thran felt his blood chill. Neural interface technology was the stuff of whispered warnings among the galactic community. Only 3 species had ever successfully integrated biological consciousness with machine intelligence, and 2 of those civilizations had destroyed themselves in the process. The third, the architects, had disappeared 12,000 years ago, leaving behind only ruins and cautionary tales. "Are you certain?" Vel'thran demanded. "The signature is unmistakable, Commander. And there's more." Meshach's color shifted from professional blue-gray to the orange-hinged pattern of deep concern. "The hull composition includes metamaterials that shouldn't be possible to manufacture outside of a stellar forge. The energy efficiency of their power distribution system exceeds theoretical maximums by 18%. And sir, there's only 1 life sign aboard." The bridge fell silent except for the ambient hum of the Sovereignty's Pride's systems. Vel'thran stared at the display, his mind racing through tactical scenarios and political implications. Humanity had emerged onto the galactic stage only 40 cycles ago, their first crude FTL vessels stumbling into Concordance space with all the grace of a newborn kicks learning to fly. The Galactic Concordance had welcomed them with a patronizing warmth reserved for young species. Study their technology, evaluate their cultural development, determine where they fit in the grand hierarchy of civilized space. Now this, a single human vessel that appeared from nowhere, carrying technology that shouldn't exist, with 1 pilot controlling what sensor readings said should require a crew of at least 50. "Open a channel," Vel'thran said finally. "Standard first contact protocols. Let's find out what they want." The communications officer, a Seln named Traverse of Light Paths, activated the quantum band transmitter. "Channel open, Commander. Translation matrix active. Attention, human vessel Midnight Runner. This is High Commander Vel'thran of the Concordance battleship Sovereignty's Pride. You are operating in restricted space without proper clearances. State your purpose and prepare to be boarded for standard inspection. The silence stretched for 5 heartbeats. 10, 20, then the display flickered, and a human face appeared on the view screen. She was young by the standards of most spacefaring species, perhaps only 3 decades into her life cycle. Her skin was the color of deep earth, her eyes dark and alert with an intelligence that seemed to catalog everything about the bridge in a single glance. Hair the color of space itself was pulled back in a functional style, and she wore a flight suit that seemed to blur the line between clothing and armor. When she smiled, it didn't reach her eyes. "Commander vel'thran," she said, her voice smooth and unhurried. "I'm Lieutenant Sofia Chen, United Human Space Forces. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. This space isn't restricted, not according to the navigation charts we received from the Concordance diplomatic mission 6 months ago. And as for inspection," her smile widened slightly, taking on an edge that made vel'thran's combat instincts stir. "I'm going to have to respectfully decline that offer." Vel'thran felt his secondary hearts accelerate. In 5 centuries of the Concordance's expansion, no single ship captain had ever refused a lawful inspection order. The audacity was either breathtaking or suicidal, possibly both. "Lieutenant Chen, I don't think you understand your situation. The Sovereignty's Pride is a Mana-class battleship. We carry a crew of 4,000. Our main batteries could reduce your vessel to its constituent atoms. Your refusal is both illegal and inadvisable." Chen interrupted, her tone conversational. "Commander, with respect, I think you're the one who doesn't understand the situation. But before we go any further down this road, I need to ask you something important. Are you familiar with human military doctrine?" The question caught vel'thran off balance. "We have reviewed your species' public military records. Your forces are organized along traditional hierarchical structures. Fleets with command ships, carrier vessels, support frigates, comparable to most emerging species, though your technology level shows some concerning advances." Chen's expression shifted to something vel'thran couldn't quite read. Was that amusement? Pity? "Commander, those public records are about 70 years out of date. Humanity's military philosophy underwent some significant changes after we figured out the neural interface problem." She leaned forward slightly, and for just a moment, her eyes seemed to reflect light that wasn't there. "Do you know why you're really out here? Why a Mana-class battleship is patrolling space that's supposedly empty?" The question sent cold calculation through vel'thran's mind. He'd received the orders 3 days ago, directly from Concordance High Command. "Patrol Sector 773. Observe but do not engage. Report all contacts immediately." The orders had been unusual in their specificity and their classification level. He'd assumed it was related to increased pirate activity or perhaps smuggling operations. "I follow my orders, Lieutenant." "As I assume, do you?" "That I do, Commander. Which is why I'm going to give you a choice right now, because in about 30 seconds, this situation is going to get a lot more complicated, and I'd really prefer to avoid that if possible." Chen's face grew serious. "Stand down your weapons systems, transmit a diplomatic status update to your command, and let me continue on my way. In return, I'll pretend I never saw your battleship in space that, according to my charts, you have no authorization to occupy. And if I refuse," vel'thran kept his voice level, professional, "then you're going to learn something about human military doctrine the hard way." Chen glanced at something off-screen. "And Commander, in about 15 seconds, you're going to detect gravitational distortions in your vicinity. A lot of them. When that happens, I need you to remember that humanity joined the Concordance in good faith. We don't want conflict. but we also don't back down from threats. Vel'thran opened his mouth to reply, but Meshach's tentacles suddenly went rigid at his station. Commander, multiple gravitational distortions. 37 no. 53 the numbers are climbing exponentially. Spatial coordinates surrounding our position. The tactical display exploded with contacts. Red warning indicators blossomed across the three-dimensional map like flowers in time-lapse, each one representing an emerging vessel. The sovereignty's pride sat in the center of the display, suddenly and completely surrounded. 50 contacts. 100. 200. They kept coming, appearing from nowhere with the same impossible energy signatures as Chen's ship. Each one the same size, the same configuration. Each one broadcasting human identification codes. The numbers climbed past 500. Multiple active targeting locks, shouted the weapons officer, her voice cracking with panic. They're painting us from every angle. Evasive maneuvers impossible were boxed in. Vel'thran stared at the display, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. This couldn't be humanity's full fleet response. The logistics alone would be impossible. To coordinate this many vessels, to have them arrive simultaneously in the same location, it would require computational power on a scale that even the Concordance's most advanced AI could barely manage. Unless every single one of those ships had a pilot with neural interface technology. Unless every single human pilot was connected to every other pilot in a network that made them think and react as a single organism. Lieutenant Chen, Vel'thran said carefully, keeping his voice steady through sheer force of will. Those are all individually piloted vessels, aren't they? Chen's image on the view screen nodded slowly. Every single one, Commander. Would you like me to introduce you? I mean, there are only 643 of us currently in this sector, but I'm sure they'd all love to say hello. 643. The number hung in the air like a condemnation. The entire Concordance battle fleet, spread across 300 systems, numbered approximately 900 capital ships. And humanity had just casually deployed two-thirds that number to surround a single battleship. How? The word escaped Vel'thran before he could stop it. The resources alone, the coordination, how is this possible? You know what the Concordance got wrong about us, Commander. Chen's voice was gentle now, almost sympathetic. You assumed our military would look like yours. One big flagship as the command vessel. Smaller support ships, a pyramid structure. That's how every species in the galaxy does it, right? The Concordance flagship is the pride of unity. The Cathari have their world ship Eternal Vigil. Every major species has one, maybe two, massive command vessels that represent their military might. She paused, letting the words sink in. But humans... We looked at that model and said, what if we went in the complete opposite direction? What if instead of one ship with thousands of crew, we had thousands of ships with one crew? What if we made every soldier a flagship, gave them the best technology we could develop, trained them to the absolute peak of capability, connected them through neural networks that let them coordinate like they shared one mind? Chen's smile was sharp now, with a pride that Vel'thran recognized from every warrior culture he'd ever encountered. Turns out, when you do that, you don't have a fleet. You have something else entirely. Something the galaxy has never seen before. Vel'thran's tactical mind was already working through the implications. If humanity could field 643 capital-class vessels in a single sector with no apparent logistical strain, how many could they field across all their territory? His species had fought the Doctrine Wars 200 cycles ago, and the final battle had involved 78 major warships on both sides combined. It had been the largest space engagement in recorded history. This has changed everything. Stand down weapons, he ordered quietly. His crew turned to stare at him, but he kept his eyes fixed on Chen's face. All stations, stand down. Diplomatic protocols. Someone get high command on the quantum communicator. They need to know about this. Chen's expression softened. Thank you, Commander. That's the smart play. For what it's worth, I'm sorry you got pulled into this. The Concordance has been testing our borders for the last 3 months, seeing how we'd respond to pressure. Unauthorized scans, accidental incursions into our space, warships in areas covered by the non-aggression treaty. Someone in your command structure wanted to know what we were hiding. She gestured around her, though the motion encompassed all the ships surrounding them. Now they know. Why reveal this now? Vel'thran asked. You could have avoided this encounter entirely. Because secrets have a cost, Commander. Every day we hide what we're capable of. Someone else in the galaxy gets the wrong idea about humanity. They think we're weak, or naive, or ripe for exploitation. Better to show our hand now, to a military officer who'll report honestly to his superiors, than to wait until someone decides to test us with actual violence. Chen's eyes held his across the view screen. We don't want to be the galaxy's enemy, but we absolutely will not be its victim. The bridge of the sovereignty's pride remained silent as Vel'thran processed this. He'd spent his entire career studying military theory, tactics, and the psychology of warfare. One lesson had been drilled into him from his earliest training to know your enemy. But humanity wasn't presenting themselves as an enemy. They were presenting themselves as equals, with a force to back up that claim. The Concordance will need to reassess, he said finally. Our entire strategic doctrine assumes rough parity in fleet composition across member species. This he gestured at the tactical display. This breaks that assumption. Then maybe it's time for a new doctrine, Chen replied. One based on actual partnership rather than managed hierarchy. We're not children who need to be guided, Commander. We're a sovereign species with our own strengths and our own approach to survival. The Concordance can accept that, or it can keep testing us. But I promise you, every test will have the same result. Vel'thran's communications officer signaled that the quantum link to High Command was established. He nodded acknowledgement, then turned back to Chen. I'll make my report. I suspect you'll be hearing from the Concordance Council within a few cycles. They'll want to discuss terms. We'll be ready, Chen said. And Commander, for what it's worth, I respect what you did here. Taking the de-escalation route when you were outgunned took courage. Different kind than facing down an enemy, but courage nonetheless. The view screen went dark, and moments later the tactical display showed the human vessels beginning their withdrawal. They didn't all jump simultaneously. That would have been too much. Too overwhelming. Instead, they vanished in waves, groups of 10 or 20 at a time, each departure marked by the same massive gravitational signatures that had announced their arrival. Within 2 minutes, the space around the Sovereignty's pride was empty again, as if the encounter had never happened, except for the sensor logs. Except for the 643 distinct energy signatures now recorded in their database, except for the fundamental shift in the balance of power that had just occurred. Vel'thran took a deep breath, straightened his uniform, and turned to face the communications station. Connect me to High Command, Priority Alpha, and someone find me everything we have on human technological development over the last 70 years. Everything. I have a feeling we've been drastically underestimating our newest neighbors. The call connected, and Vel'thran found himself facing Fleet Admiral Korath, whose ancient features were set in a pattern that suggested profound irritation at being disturbed. Commander Vel'thran, your priority code indicates extreme urgency. This had better be justified. Admiral Vel'thran said carefully, I need to report first contact with a significant human military presence. I think we may have seriously miscalculated their capabilities. Explain. Vel'thran took another breath and began his report, knowing that the next few hours would reshape the political landscape of the entire Concordance. As he spoke, describing the encounter in precise military language, he couldn't shake the memory of Chen's face. The quiet confidence, the absolute certainty that she held the stronger position, despite being outnumbered 4,000 to 1 by his crew. She hadn't been bluffing or posturing. She'd simply been stating facts. And in that moment, Vel'thran understood something that would take the Concordance Council months to accept. Humanity wasn't an emerging species that needed guidance or management. They were a pure power, playing by rules they'd written themselves, and the galaxy was going to have to adjust to that reality whether it liked it or not. The question was how much damage would be done before everyone accepted it. 3 days later, Lieutenant Sofia Chen sat in the briefing room of the Midnight Runner, her neural interface still tingling with the ghost of connection to her fellow pilots. The swarm coordination protocols always left her feeling slightly disconnected for a few hours afterward, like wearing clothes that didn't quite fit. Her ship hung in high orbit above New Seattle, humanity's third colony world and home to the 47th Fighter Wing of which she was a member. The view screen on her briefing room wall showed a recorded feed from the Concordance News Network, and she watched with grim satisfaction as various alien commentators tried to process what had happened in Sector 773. The footage captured by the Sovereignty's Pride's external cameras and apparently leaked by someone in their chain of command showed the emergence of the human response fleet with crystal clarity. Unprecedented, one trillion commentator was saying, her tentacles writhing in agitation. The tactical implications alone are staggering. If humanity can deploy this kind of force to any contested region, traditional fleet doctrine becomes almost meaningless. Perhaps that was their intention, replied a Cathari military analyst, his crystalline voice carrying undertones of grudging respect. We've been so focused on their lack of traditional command vessels that we never considered they might not need them. Every pilot acts as their own command node. Every ship is a flagship. It's actually quite elegant. Sofia turned off the feed and pulled up her mission logs, reviewing the encounter with Commander Vel'thran. She'd meant what she said about respecting his choice to de-escalate. It would have been easy for him to let pride or protocol override common sense, to demand the inspection even in the face of overwhelming force. That he hadn't suggested a flexibility of mind that humanity needed to find more of in the Concordance. Her neural interface pinged with an incoming message flagged as priority. She opened it and felt her eyebrows rise. The message bore the seal of Admiral Jackson Pierce, commander of the United Human Space Forces. Lieutenant Chen, report to the Embassy of Stars at your earliest convenience. We have a situation that requires your specific experience and expertise. Full brief upon arrival. This is not optional. Pierce out. The Embassy of Stars was humanity's diplomatic installation on Concordance Prime, the ancient world that served as the capital of the galactic community. For Sofia to be called there meant the fallout from the Sector 773 incident had escalated beyond simple military posturing. The Concordance wanted to talk, and they wanted to talk to someone who'd been part of the demonstration. She stood, checking her flight suit with the automatic gestures of long practice, and headed for her ship's cockpit. The Midnight Runner welcomed her with the warmth of a trusted companion, systems coming online as her neural interface synced with the ship's consciousness. Not AI. Humanity had learned the hard lessons about that from the Concordance's history, but something close. an extension of her own mind built into every system and circuit of the vessel. "All right, runner," she said softly, settling into the pilot's couch as the neural connection deepened. "Let's go see what fresh hell awaits us at Concordance Prime." The transition to FTL was seamless, reality folding around them as the ship's reality warping drive engaged. Sofia felt the familiar sensation of being everywhere and nowhere at once, the universe compressing to a single point that was somehow infinite. 3 subjective seconds later, reality reasserted itself, and she was in orbit around Concordance Prime. The planet was beautiful in the way that only ancient worlds could be, its surface a patchwork of biomass carefully maintained by atmospheric processors older than human civilization. Orbital habitats ringed it like jewels, each one home to millions of beings from dozens of species. The heart of galactic civilization, the place where differences were supposedly set aside in favor of cooperation and mutual prosperity. Sofia had been here twice before and hadn't been impressed either time. Too much bureaucracy, too many layers of protocol designed to keep emerging species in their place. But orders were orders, and Admiral Pierce didn't issue them lightly. She guided the Midnight Runner toward the docking coordinates, noting the unusual number of warships in orbit. At least 30 capital vessels from various Concordance members, all positioned with clear fields of fire covering the major approach vectors. Someone was taking security very seriously, which meant the political situation was even more volatile than she'd thought. The docking procedure was handled by automated systems, and within minutes she was cycling through the airlock into the Embassy of Stars. The facility was technically human sovereign territory, a small piece of Earth transplanted to alien soil. The air tasted different here, processed through human standard filters, carrying the scent of recycled atmosphere that every spacer knew by heart. Admiral Pierce was waiting for her in the embassy's secure briefing room, along with Ambassador Maria Rodriguez and a figure Sofia didn't recognize, a Selene female whose light patterns indicated extreme age and corresponding authority. "Lieutenant Chen," Pierce said, standing to greet her. The Admiral was a compact man in his 60s, his gray hair cut military short, his eyes carrying the weight of 3 decades in command. "Thank you for responding so quickly. I know this is irregular, but circumstances have accelerated beyond our initial projections." "Sir," Sofia came to attention, then relaxed as Pierce waved the formality away. "This is Chorus of Winds Through Crystal Caves," Pierce continued, gesturing to the Selene. "She holds a position on the Concordance Council roughly equivalent to Secretary of Defense. She's been the voice of reason in the debate following your encounter with Commander Vel'thran." Chorus of Winds light patterns shifted to hues. Sofia's neural interface translated as respectful greeting mixed with profound concern. "Lieutenant Chen, your actions 3 days ago have created significant turbulence in the Concordance political structure. I am here to determine whether that turbulence will resolve into constructive change or destructive chaos." "Ma'am," Sofia said carefully, "I followed my orders and defended human sovereign space when a foreign military vessel attempted an illegal boarding action. I'm not sure how that constitutes creating turbulence." "The turbulence," Ambassador Rodriguez interjected, her voice carrying the weary patience of someone who'd spent too many hours in diplomatic negotiations, "comes from the fact that we apparently never informed the Concordance about the true size of our military capability. They're calling it a breach of the mutual transparency protocols. With respect, Ambassador, we never violated any protocols. The Concordance asked for information about our fleet composition 7 years ago, and we provided it. The fact that they assumed our fleet worked like theirs isn't our problem." Sofia kept her tone professional, but she could feel frustration bubbling underneath. This was exactly the kind of bureaucratic nonsense that made her prefer the clean simplicity of military operations. The information you provided, Chorus of Winds said, her patterns taking on shades of controlled frustration, indicated that humanity maintained approximately 200 major warships and 3,000 support vessels. What Lieutenant Chen demonstrated was that humanity apparently has at least several 100,000 combat-capable vessels, each piloted by an individual with neural interface capabilities that we classified as extremely dangerous technology. Again, with respect, Sofia replied, we reported our major warships. We have 200 carrier vessels that serve as mobile bases and logistics hubs. What the Concordance failed to ask about was our fighter complement. That's not deception, that's your intelligence services failing to ask the right questions. Pierce cleared his throat. While I appreciate your directness, Lieutenant, this situation requires a more nuanced approach. Chorus of Winds has come here with a proposal from a faction of the Concordance Council. They want to understand our military doctrine, and they want assurances that we're not planning to use our numerical advantage for aggressive expansion. And the other faction? Sofia asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Wants to classify humanity as a Category 5 threat and implement containment protocols, Rodriguez said grimly, which would mean economic sanctions, travel restrictions, and mandatory inspections of all human vessels, effectively treating us as an enemy state while maintaining the fiction of Concordance membership. Sofia felt her jaw tighten. She'd served 6 years in the Space Forces, had done 2 tours on the frontier protecting human colonies from pirate raids and stellar phenomena. She'd saved lives, defended civilians, upheld every principle humanity claimed to value. And now some alien bureaucrats wanted to treat her like a threat simply because humans had figured out a better way to organize their military. What do you need from me? She asked. Chorus of Winds' light patterns shifted to what Sofia's interface translated as cautious hope. The Council has requested a demonstration. They want to see human military doctrine in action, to understand how your vessels operate and coordinate. More importantly, they want to understand why you made the choices you did. Why individual ships instead of traditional fleet structures? Why neural interfaces? Why does humanity give so much power and autonomy to individual soldiers? That's a complicated question, Sofia said slowly. Then we have time for a complicated answer, Pierce said. You're being assigned as our military liaison to the Concordance Council for the next 3 weeks. Your job is to explain human doctrine, demonstrate our capabilities, and convince enough council members that we're not a threat. Think you can handle that? Sofia looked at the 3 faces watching her, the admiral's steady confidence, the ambassador's cautious hope, and the alien official's careful neutrality. This wasn't what she'd signed up for. She was a pilot, not a diplomat. But then again, maybe that was exactly why they needed her. The politicians could talk about protocols and treaties all day, but she could show them what it meant to be a human soldier. I'll do my best, sir, she said finally, but I'm going to need some backup. If the council wants to understand human doctrine, they need to meet more than just one pilot. Already arranged, Rodriguez said with a slight smile. 3 members of your wing are being transferred here temporarily. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, Lieutenant Yuki Tanaka, and Captain James Rodriguez. No relation, she added at Sofia's raised eyebrow. They'll arrive tomorrow. You'll have a full team to work with. Then let's give the Concordance their demonstration, Sofia said. But we do it on our terms. No restrictions on what we show them. No limitations on what we say. If they want the truth about humanity, They're going to get all of it. Chorus of winds patterns flickered with something that might have been amusement or apprehension. Sophia's interface couldn't quite parse it. I will inform the council of your terms. I suspect they will accept. Many of them are genuinely curious about your species, Lieutenant. You are, after all, the first new military power to emerge in 300 cycles. That makes you either a threat or an opportunity, depending on how the next few weeks progress. Let's aim for opportunity, Sofia said. I've got enough enemies without adding the entire galactic community to the list. The meeting concluded with formal pleasantries, and Sofia found herself assigned quarters in the embassy's residential section. The rooms were comfortable but generic, designed to accommodate human needs without reflecting any particular personality or culture. She dropped her gear on the bed and stared out the viewport at Concordance Prime turning slowly below. 3 weeks to convince the galaxy that humanity wasn't a threat. 3 weeks to explain a military doctrine that had taken humanity 40 years to develop and perfect. 3 weeks to bridge a cultural gap so vast that most species couldn't even conceptualize how human thinking worked. No pressure at all. Her neural interface pinged with an incoming connection request. She accepted, and Marcus Webb's familiar face appeared in her visual overlay. Soph, heard you got yourself into some interesting trouble. Something about starting an interstellar incident. Despite everything, Sofia felt herself smile. Marcus had been her wingmate through advanced training and their first combat deployment. If she had to explain humanity to a bunch of confused aliens, at least she'd have a friendly face backing her up. Just doing my job, Marcus. You know how it is. Routine patrol, unauthorized foreign military vessel, sudden deployment of 643 armed response units. Tuesday stuff, right? Real routine. Yuki's already making bets on how long before you accidentally cause a war. She's giving it 8 days. Tell Yuki to have more faith. I can definitely make it at least 10. They bantered for a few more minutes, the easy camaraderie of soldiers who'd trusted each other with their lives. When the connection ended, Sofia felt marginally better about the task ahead. She wasn't doing this alone. She had her team, her training, and the backing of the entire human military establishment. And if that wasn't enough to convince the Concordance that humanity deserved respect, then maybe they needed a more direct demonstration of what human soldiers could really do. The first session with the Concordance Council took place in a chamber that Sofia's neural interface informed her had been used for important deliberations since before humanity had developed written language. The space was vast, with seating arranged in concentric circles that allowed representatives from dozens of species to observe and participate. Holographic displays floated throughout the chamber, showing real-time translations and data visualizations. Sofia stood in the center circle, flanked by Marcus, Yuki, and Captain Rodriguez. All 4 of them wore their dress uniforms, not the armored flight suits they preferred, but the formal attire that represented humanity in official diplomatic functions. Sofia had to suppress the urge to tug at her collar. She was far more comfortable in a cockpit than in front of an audience. Lieutenant Sofia Chen, announced the chamber's AI in the flat, emotionless tones of pure translation. You stand before the Concordance Council to explain the military doctrine of the United Human Space Forces. The Council recognizes you and your companions. You may begin when ready. Sofia took a deep breath and activated the neural link to the chamber's display systems. Holographic images materialized around her, showing the evolution of human military thought from ancient times to the present day. Honorable members of the council, she began, her voice steady. To understand why humanity organizes our military the way we do, you need to understand where we came from. For most of our history, we've been a fractured species. We fought each other constantly, developed weapons specifically to kill other humans, and created military structures designed around the principle of concentrated force under centralized command. Images showed ancient armies, industrial age warfare, the terrible conflicts of the 20th and 21st centuries. Sofia saw some council members recoil at the brutality displayed, while others leaned forward with interest. We were good at war, she continued. Too good. By the time we developed nuclear weapons, we'd created the capacity to destroy our own civilization. For a while, we teetered on that edge, one mistake away from extinction. But we didn't fall. We learned, we adapted, and when we finally developed FTL technology and joined the Galactic community, we brought those lessons with us. She gestured, and the images shifted to show humanity's first encounters with the Concordance. The clumsy negotiations, the cultural misunderstandings, the gradual process of integration. We studied how other species organized their militaries. The traditional Model 1 or more capital ships supported by smaller vessels, all under centralized command. It's a model that makes sense for species that evolved in environments where cooperation came naturally, where individuals trusted their leadership without question. But that's not humanity. Marcus stepped forward, his own holographic display activating. Humans are individualists by nature. We value personal autonomy, individual achievement, and the right to question authority. That's not a flaw, it's a feature. It's what drove us to explore, to innovate, to push boundaries. But it also means that traditional military structures chafe against our psychology. So we asked ourselves a question. Yuki added, her accented English flowing smoothly through the translation systems. What if we didn't fight against our nature? What if we built a military that enhanced our strengths instead of suppressing them? What if we gave every soldier the tools and authority to make their own decisions, to act as an independent force while still coordinating with the whole? Captain Rodriguez brought up technical schematics of human vessels. The result is what you saw in Sector 773. Every pilot has their own ship, optimized for their personal combat style and equipped with the best technology we can produce. Neural interfaces let us coordinate without requiring traditional command structures. We operate as a distributed network, no central point of failure, no single target that can cripple our entire force. Sofia watched the council members processing this information. Some looked intrigued, others skeptical, a few openly hostile. She could read their body language even through the alien morphology. These were beings who'd been raised in cultures where hierarchy and order were paramount. The idea of giving so much power to individual soldiers probably seemed like chaos to them. I know what you're thinking, she said, her voice cutting through the murmur of council discussions. This sounds dangerous, unstable. How can humanity possibly maintain discipline if every soldier operates independently? How do you prevent rogue actors from using that power for personal gain? The answer, Marcus said, is selection and training. We don't give these ships to just anyone. Every pilot goes through years of evaluation, psychological screening, and training. We're looking for people who can handle autonomy without abusing it, who understand that freedom comes with responsibility. And the neural interfaces, Yuki continued, aren't just communication tools, they're also monitoring systems. Every pilot is connected to the network. We can sense each other's emotional states, mental health, stress levels. If someone starts showing signs of instability, their wingmates know immediately. It's mutual accountability taken to the highest possible level. Sofia pulled up statistics on her display. In 6 years of operating under this doctrine, we've had 0 instances of pilots using their vessels for unauthorized actions. 0 cases of psychological breaks leading to violence. 0 friendly fire incidents. Our casualty rates in combat scenarios are 63% lower than comparable Concordance forces, and our mission success rate is 94%. Because when every soldier is a flagship, Captain Rodriguez said, every soldier has a stake in the mission's success. We're not just following orders, we're actively participating in strategy and execution. That investment leads to better decision-making and more creative problem-solving. Chorus of winds, light Tatans shifted to request permission to speak. This is all very compelling, Lieutenant Chen, but you've addressed logistics and psychology. You haven't addressed the fundamental question that concerns many council members. Why do humans need this level of military capability at all? You are a young species, newly arrived in galactic society. You have no territorial disputes, no historical enemies, no strategic interests that require such overwhelming force. So why build it? The chamber fell silent, all attention focused on Sofia. This was the core question, the one that would determine whether humanity was seen as a potential ally or a looming threat. She'd known it was coming, had prepared her answer with Admiral Pierce and Ambassador Rodriguez, but standing here, facing the collected wisdom and power of galactic civilization, she felt the weight of her words in a way that preparation couldn't quite capture. Because we remember what it's like to be vulnerable, she said quietly. Before we developed nuclear weapons, humanity went through a period we call the World Wars. Conflicts so devastating that they killed tens of millions of people and reshaped our entire civilization. And do you know what made those wars possible? The assumption that some humans were weak, that they could be conquered or controlled without consequence. She let that sink in, watching faces and patterns and expressions across dozens of species. When we joined the Concordance, we came as supplicants. We were the new kids, the emerging species that needed guidance and protection. And for a while, that was fine. We learned from you, studied your technology, integrated into your economic systems. But we also watched how you treated other emerging species. We saw the patronizing attitudes, the subtle and not so subtle exploitation. We saw how easily the Concordance could decide that a species wasn't ready for full membership, wasn't developed enough for equal status. We're not accusing anyone of malice, Marcus added quickly. We understand that the Concordance has maintained peace for centuries through careful management of power dynamics. But humanity looked at that system and decided we didn't want to be managed. We wanted to be respected. And respect, Yuki said, her voice hard, comes from strength. Not because we want to threaten anyone, but because the galaxy doesn't respect weakness. It tolerates it, manages it, sometimes even pities it, but it doesn't respect it. Sofia nodded. So we built a military that ensures humanity will never be vulnerable again. Every pilot, every ship, every weapon system exists to guarantee that we control our own destiny. We're not planning to conquer anyone. We're not interested in territorial expansion or resource extraction or any of the traditional causes of conflict. But we absolutely will not allow anyone to make decisions for us, to dictate our development, or to treat us as anything less than equals. That demonstration in Sector 773, Captain Rodriguez said, wasn't a threat. It was a statement. You sent a battleship to test us, to see if we'd fold under pressure. We showed you that we won't. We'll defend our territory, our rights, and our sovereignty with whatever force is necessary. But we'll also de-escalate when given the opportunity, as Lieutenant Chen did with Commander Vel'thran. We're not asking you to like our military doctrine, Sofia concluded. We're asking you to accept it as a legitimate choice made by a sovereign species. We're different from you. Our psychology, our history, Our values, they lead us to different conclusions about how to organize ourselves. That's not a threat to the concordance. It's evidence that the concordance can be flexible enough to accommodate different approaches. The chamber erupted in discussion, dozens of species speaking simultaneously through the translation systems. Sofia stood quietly, her three companions flanking her, and waited for the chaos to resolve. She'd said her piece. Now it was up to the council to decide how to respond. Chorus of winds, light patterns cut through the noise with a flash of command authority. The council will adjourn for deliberation. Lieutenant Chen and her companions will remain available for further questions. This session is concluded. As the council members filed out, Sofia felt the tension drain from her shoulders. Marcus gave her a subtle thumbs up, and Yuki grinned. Captain Rodriguez just nodded, his expression unreadable but not disapproving. "Well," Sofia said quietly, "that could have gone worse." "Could have done better too," Marcus replied. "Did you see the Cathari delegation? They looked ready to start a war right here." "The Cathari are always ready to start a war," Yuki said dismissively. "It's their whole cultural identity." But the Selns seemed receptive, and the Trillians were definitely interested. "If we can get a few key species on our side, the rest will follow." Sofia wasn't so sure, but she appreciated Yuki's optimism. The truth was, they'd just appended centuries of galactic military doctrine and told the most powerful species in the galaxy that humanity wasn't going to play by their rules. That took time to process, and not everyone would reach the same conclusion. Over the next 2 weeks, Sofia and her team conducted demonstrations, answered thousands of questions, and participated in more formal sessions with various council committees. They showed videos of human training programs, explained the psychological frameworks that made neural interfaces safe, and walked council members through tactical scenarios that illustrated how distributed command structures worked in practice. Some species were genuinely curious, asking thoughtful questions about how humanity had solved problems that they'd considered unsolvable. Others were openly skeptical, poking holes in every claim and demanding more evidence. A few were hostile, seeing humanity's approach as an implicit criticism of their own military traditions. On the 15th day, Sofia was conducting a practical demonstration for a group of military observers from various species. She'd brought the Midnight Runner down to a Concordance training facility, a massive orbital complex where different species practiced coordination exercises and tested new tactical doctrines. The observers watched from a safe distance as Sofia ran through a series of maneuvers: high-speed intercepts, precision strikes against moving targets, evasive patterns that pushed her ship's capabilities to the limit. Her neural interface let her react faster than conscious thought, her mind and the ship's systems working in perfect synchronization. "The human vessel's acceleration profile is impossible," one Cathari observer announced, his crystalline voice ringing with certainty. "Our physics models predict structural failure at those G-forces, yet the ship remains intact. The hull uses adaptive metamaterials," Sofia explained over the open channel, her voice calm despite pulling 9 Gs in a spiraling dive. "They redistribute stress in real time based on neural feedback. The ship becomes an extension of the pilot's body, responding to intention as much as control input." "And the pilot?" asked a Trillian military commander. "What prevents the acceleration from turning your organs into paste?" "Inertial compensation field integrated with my neural interface. The ship knows where my body is, how it's positioned, and adjusts the field to protect vulnerable tissues. It's not comfortable, but it's survivable." She rolled the Midnight Runner through a series of complex maneuvers, demonstrating capabilities that made several observers audibly gasp. The ship moved like a living thing, responding to threats and opportunities with a fluidity that traditional vessels couldn't match. Now imagine 643 of these ships working together, Sofia said as she brought the runner back to a stable orbit. Each pilot has their own specialty, their own tactical preferences, but we're all connected through the neural network. We don't need to communicate verbally or wait for orders. We feel each other's intentions, coordinate instinctively. It's like being part of a single organism with hundreds of bodies. It sounds like hive mind behavior, a Seln observer noted. But you claim to maintain individual autonomy. How is that possible? Sofia considered the question carefully. It was one she'd struggled to explain before, because the experience of neural networking didn't translate well into words. Think of it like jazz music, she said finally. Each musician plays their own instrument, makes their own choices, expresses their individual creativity, but they're all listening to each other, responding to the rhythms and melodies around them. The result is something that's simultaneously individual and collective. That's what human pilots do. We improvise together, but we never lose ourselves in the process. Fascinating, the Seln said, and deeply unsettling. Such connectivity could be exploited. What prevents an enemy from hijacking your neural network and turning your own forces against you? Multiple layers of encryption and security protocols, Sofia replied. But more importantly, the network is based on trust. We can sense when someone's connection is compromised or altered. It would be like trying to fake someone's personality, possible in theory, but humans are really good at detecting that kind of deception. The demonstrations continued for another 3 hours, with observers taking turns asking questions and requesting specific maneuvers. By the time Sofia docked the Midnight Runner back in the embassy's bay, she was exhausted but satisfied. They'd seen what human pilots could do. Now they just needed to decide what that meant for the future of human-concordance relations. On the 18th day, Sofia was summoned back to the council chamber for what Ambassador Rodriguez described as the moment of truth. The council had completed its deliberations and was ready to announce its decision regarding humanity's status within the Concordance. Sofia stood in the center circle again, this time alone. Marcus, Yuki, and Captain Rodriguez watched from the observers' gallery, along with Admiral Pierce and half the human embassy staff. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Chorus of Winds spoke first, her light patterns formal and carefully controlled. Lieutenant Sofia Chen, the Concordance Council has reviewed the information you provided regarding human military doctrine. We have deliberated extensively on the implications of your force structure and capabilities. We have reached a decision. Sofia kept her face neutral, her breathing steady. Whatever came next, she'd face it with the same professionalism she'd shown throughout this process. The Council has determined, Chorus of Winds continued, that humanity's military organization, while unconventional, does not constitute a threat to concordance, peace, and stability. Furthermore, we acknowledge that humanity's approach to warfare represents a legitimate alternative to traditional doctrine, one that reflects your species' unique psychology and historical development. Sofia felt some of the tension leave her shoulders, but she didn't relax completely. There was a however coming. She could sense it in the way Chorus of Winds patterns flittered. However, the Seln continued, and there it was. The Council requires certain assurances. Humanity must agree to participate in joint military exercises with concordance forces to facilitate understanding and cooperation. You must share technical specifications of your vessels and weapons systems, not for replication, but for defensive planning purposes. and you must accept the presence of Concordance observers in your military academies and training facilities. In return, a Cathari Council member added, his voice carrying overtones of grudging respect, humanity will be granted full military partnership status within the Concordance. You will have equal voice in defense planning and strategic decision-making. You will no longer be classified as an emerging species subject to developmental oversight, and the Concordance will formally recognize your territorial claims and sovereignty over your current systems. Sofia processed this quickly. It wasn't everything humanity wanted. The monitoring requirements would be controversial back home, but it was far better than the alternative of being classified as a threat. And the recognition of equal partnership status was huge. That meant humanity wouldn't have to deal with the patronizing attitudes and second-class treatment that had characterized their early years in the Concordance. I don't have the authority to accept these terms on behalf of humanity, Sofia said carefully. But I can recommend to my superiors that they be seriously considered. May I ask what changed the Council's perspective? Another Council member species Sofia didn't recognize, with multiple vocal organs that produced an eerie harmony, spoke up. You demonstrated that human military power comes with responsibility and restraint. Commander Vel'thran's report emphasized that you could have destroyed his vessel, but chose de-escalation. Your presentation to this council showed respect for our concerns even as you refused to compromise your principles. These are the actions of a mature species. One that understands power must be tempered with wisdom. Additionally, a Trillian representative added, several council members have noted that the galaxy faces emerging threats that traditional military doctrine may not be adequate to address. The pirate coalitions growing in the Outer Rim, the automated defense systems left behind by extinct civilizations, the possibility of contact with hostile extragalactic intelligences. Having a military force that thinks and operates differently from our traditional approaches may prove valuable. Chorus of Winds patterns shifted to something Sofia's interface translated as wry amusement. In short, Lieutenant, you've convinced us that humanity's strange approach to warfare might be crazy enough to work, and perhaps the galaxy needs a little more craziness in these times. Sofia couldn't help but smile. I think I can live with that assessment. Thank you, honorable council members. I'll convey your decision to my superiors immediately. The formal session concluded, and Sofia made her way back to the embassy through crowds of aliens who regarded her with new interest. Some offered greetings and congratulations. Others kept their distance, still uncertain about what humanity represented. But the open hostility she'd sensed in the early days was gone, replaced by cautious acceptance. In the embassy's secure conference room, Sofia briefed Admiral Pierce and Ambassador Rodriguez on the council's terms. Pierce listened carefully, his expression thoughtful. They're asking for a lot, he said finally. Observers in our training facilities means they'll learn all our tricks. Technical specifications means they could potentially develop countermeasures. True, Rodriguez agreed. But consider what we're getting in return. Full partnership status means we have real influence over Concordance policy. We'd be one of maybe 20 species with that level of authority. And the territorial recognition solidifies our claim to the colonies we've already established. That's worth quite a bit. The question is whether the Security Council back home will see it that way, Pierce said. Sofia, you've spent more time with these aliens than any of us. What's your read on whether they'll honor these terms? Sofia thought about Chorus of Winds, about Commander Vel'thran, about the various council members she'd spoken with over the past 3 weeks. I think they will, sir. The Concordance has its flaws: bureaucratic, sometimes arrogant, occasionally condescending, but they're not dishonorable. When they make a formal agreement, they stick to it, and I think some of them genuinely respect what we've accomplished. Then I'll recommend acceptance, Pierce decided, with provisions for regular review and the right to withdraw if we determine the Concordance is abusing the monitoring arrangements. But overall, I think you did good work here, Lieutenant. You showed them that humanity can be both strong and reasonable. That's not an easy balance to strike. Thank you, sir. Though I had help. Sofia glanced at the viewport where she could see Marcus, Yuki, and Captain Rodriguez celebrating in the embassy's recreation area. We did this as a team. Of course you did, Rodriguez said with a knowing smile. That's the human way, isn't it? Individual capability combined with collective effort. Maybe that's the real lesson the Concordance needs to learn from us. The formal acceptance of terms took another 3 days to finalize, with lawyers and diplomats from both sides haggling over specific language and implementation details. But on the 21st day of Sofia's assignment, the treaty was signed in a ceremony broadcast across the entire Concordance network. Sofia stood at attention in her dress uniform as Ambassador Rodriguez and Chorus of Winds affixed their respective seals to the document, a combination of human digital signature and alien bioauthentication that made the agreement binding under both legal systems. Cameras captured the moment from every angle, and Sofia knew that people across dozens of worlds were watching humanity take this step into true partnership with galactic civilization. After the ceremony, there was a reception where diplomats and military officers from various species mingled and made polite conversation. Sofia found herself cornered by a group of junior officers from different Concordance militaries, all curious about human training and tactics. Is it true you train by fighting each other in full combat simulations? Asked a young Trillian whose tentacles were colored with the enthusiasm of youth. That seems incredibly dangerous. It is dangerous, Sofia confirmed. We lose a few pilots every year in training accidents. But we figure it's better to make mistakes in training than in actual combat. And the neural interfaces mean we can push safety margins that would be impossible with traditional crew vessels. I would like to train with human pilots someday, a Cathari officer said, his crystalline structure resonating with what Sofia had learned to recognize as curiosity rather than hostility. To understand how you think, how you move in 3 dimensions without the constraints we accept as normal. Maybe that can be arranged, Sofia replied. The treaty calls for joint exercises. No reason those can't include training exchanges. The conversation continued for another hour, and Sofia found herself genuinely enjoying it. These weren't politicians or bureaucrats, they were fellow soldiers. People who understood the weight of duty and the bonds of service. The language might be different, the cultures alien, but the fundamental experience of military service created a common ground. As the reception wound down, Sofia stepped out onto one of the embassy's observation decks. The stars of Concordance Prime's system spread out before her, each one a sun with its own worlds and civilizations. Somewhere out there, the Midnight Runner waited in its docking bay, ready for whatever came next. Marcus found her there a few minutes later, 2 glasses of something amber in his hands. Thought you might want this. It's technically whiskey, though I think the embassy staff synthesized it from local compounds. Close enough, Sofia said, accepting the glass. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the stars. You think this will actually work? Marcus asked finally. Full partnership with the Concordance, joint operations, all of it. I think we made a good start, Sofia replied. The hard part comes next, actually living up to the treaty, proving we can be trusted with equal status, showing the galaxy that humanity's way of doing things isn't just effective but ethical. No pressure, right? When has anything humanity done ever been without pressure? Sophia took a sip of the synthetic whiskey, grimacing slightly at the taste. Definitely not real whiskey, but it would do. We're the species that went from cave paintings to spaceflight in 10,000 years. We invented democracy and devastated our environment and then fixed it again. We nearly destroyed ourselves with nuclear weapons and then built a civilization that spans multiple star systems. Pressure is kind of our thing. True, Marcus conceded. So what happens to us now? Back to routine patrols. Actually, Admiral Pierce offered me a new assignment. They're forming a joint human concordance task force to deal with the pirate problem in the Outer Rim. Want to be my wingmate on that? Marcus grinned. Is that even a question? Someone's got to keep you from starting another interstellar incident. Hey, I only start incidents when absolutely necessary, right? And somehow it's always absolutely necessary. They laughed, the sound carrying across the observation deck. Below them, Concordance Prime continued its ancient rotation, home to billions of beings from hundreds of species. And somewhere out there, human colonies were growing, human ships were exploring, human civilization was carving out its place in the vast tapestry of galactic society. Sophia thought about the journey that had brought her here, from a kid growing up in the orbital habitats above Earth to a pilot with one of humanity's most advanced vessels, to the person who'd stood before the Concordance Council and defended humanity's right to forge its own path. It hadn't been what she'd planned when she'd joined the Space Forces. But then again, the best stories rarely were. You know what the really crazy part is? Sophia said quietly. We won, not through conquest or intimidation or overwhelming force. We won by being so completely ourselves that the galaxy had no choice but to accept us as we are. That is pretty crazy, Marcus agreed. But then again, humans have been doing the impossible since we first looked up at the stars and decided we belonged there. To doing the impossible, Sophia raised her glass. To humanity, Marcus responded, touching his glass to hers. Fuck yeah. They drank, and the stars shone on, indifferent and eternal. But somewhere in that vast darkness, 643 human vessels patrolled their assigned sectors, each one a flagship in its own right. Each pilot a sovereign force connected to a greater whole. The galaxy had assumed humanity would follow the same patterns as every other species, build the same structures, accept the same limitations. They'd been wrong, and now they knew it. In the days that followed, as Sophia prepared to leave Concordance Prime and return to active duty, she received messages from across human space. Fellow pilots congratulating her on the successful negotiations. Colonists thanking her for securing humanity's territorial rights. Even a few messages from aliens, mostly junior military officers who'd seen the demonstrations and wanted to learn more about human tactics. But the message that meant the most came from Commander Vel'thran, transmitted through official channels but carrying a personal touch that the standard military protocols didn't quite hide. Lieutenant Chen, his translated voice said in the recorded message, I wanted to personally congratulate you on your successful presentation to the Council. What you accomplished in those 3 weeks will shape human concordance relations for generations. I also wanted to thank you for the mercy you showed during our encounter in Sector 773. You could have humiliated me, and my crew could have used the situation to demonstrate dominance. Instead, you offered dignity and respect. That is the mark of a true warrior, regardless of species. I look forward to the day when we might serve together rather than face each other across a tactical display. Until then, fair skies and following winds. Sofia saved the message to her personal files, adding it to the small collection of moments that defined her career. Then she boarded the Midnight Runner, synced with the ship's systems through her neural interface, and filed a flight plan back to New Seattle. As the ship accelerated away from Concordance Prime, Sofia felt the familiar rush of freedom that came with being in space, moving at speeds that would have killed her ancestors, carrying weapons that could crack planets. She was a human soldier, a pilot of the new age, a representative of a species that had looked at the galaxy's expectations and chosen a different path. The neural interface whispered with the presence of her fellow pilots, hundreds of minds touching hers across the vast distances of space. They were out there, each one in their own flagship, each one ready to defend humanity's interests and uphold the principles they'd sworn to protect. Runner to Wing Command, she transmitted, returning to active duty. Status green across all systems. Ready for assignment. Welcome back, Runner, came the response from Captain Rodriguez, who'd been promoted to Wing Commander in her absence. We've got a situation developing in the Outer Rim. Pirates hitting civilian transports. Thought you might want first crack at it. Sofia felt her smile turn fierce. Copy that, Command. Transmitting coordinates now. Runner is moving to intercept. The ship responded to her intent, reality folding around them as the FTL drive engaged. For just a moment, Sofia existed in that strange space between destinations, connected to her ship, to her fellow pilots, to the vast network of human consciousness that spanned the stars. Then they emerged into normal space, sensors already tracking the pirate vessels that had been foolish enough to threaten human shipping. Sofia's tactical mind assessed the situation in microseconds, formulating a plan that would minimize civilian casualties while demonstrating why piracy in human space was a very bad idea. Runner to civilian vessels, she transmitted. This is the US Midnight Runner. You are under our protection. Recommend you drop to sublight and stand by for escort. Midnight Runner, this is the transport Bright Fortune. Thank the stars you're here. These pirates have been shadowing us for hours. There's at least 6 of them. Copy that, Bright Fortune. 6 targets confirmed. They won't be a problem much longer. Sofia's neural interface reached out across space, touching the minds of other pilots in the sector. Without words, without formal communication, they coordinated. 3 more human vessels emerged from FTL, positioned to cut off any escape routes. The pirates suddenly found themselves facing not 1 but 4 human warships, each one as capable as a Concordance capital vessel, each one piloted by someone who'd trained their entire adult life for this moment. The pirate leader made the smart choice and surrendered without firing a shot. Bright Fortune, you're clear, Sofia transmitted. Recommend you continue on your course. We'll escort these pirates back to the nearest Concordance security station. Thank you, Runner. We'll spread the word human space is protected space. Sofia acknowledged and began the process of securing the pirate vessels. It was routine work, the kind that occupied most of her duty time, but it mattered. Every civilian ship protected, every pirate captured, every successful mission added to humanity's reputation as a responsible member of galactic civilization. As she worked, Sofia thought about the Council's decision, about the treaty she'd helped secure, about the future that humanity was building among the stars. They'd come so far in such a short time, from a single planet to a spacefaring civilization, from nuclear weapons to neural interfaces, from near self-destruction to partnership with dozens of alien species. And through it all, Humanity had remained fundamentally human, individualistic, innovative, stubborn, compassionate, fierce when threatened but capable of great mercy. They'd taken the galaxy's expectations one flagship per species and turned them inside out. Why have one flagship when every soldier could be a flagship? Why concentrate power when distributing it made you stronger? The galaxy had assumed humans would follow the established patterns. They'd been wrong, and in being wrong, they'd learned something valuable, that there were always new ways to solve old problems, that diversity of thought and approach made everyone stronger, that the newest species in the Concordance might have lessons to teach the oldest. Sofia guided the captured pirate vessels toward their destination, her mind already moving to the next mission, the next challenge, the next opportunity to prove that humanity's place among the stars had been earned through courage, innovation, and an absolute refusal to be anything other than what they were. One flagship per species. The galaxy could keep that tradition if it wanted. Humanity would stick with one flagship per soldier. Thank you very much. And if that made them strange, unpredictable, or even a little bit intimidating, well, that was fine too, because in the end, humanity hadn't come to the stars to fit in. They'd come to thrive, to grow, to reach their potential as a species. And if that meant doing things differently than everyone else, if it meant challenging assumptions that had stood for millennia, if it meant showing the galaxy that there were always new possibilities waiting to be explored, then humanity would do it with pride, with honor, and with 643 armed response units ready to back up their words with action. Because that was the human way, and the galaxy was just going to have to adjust. Sofia Chen, pilot of the USP Midnight Runner, flagship of the United Human Space Forces, smiled as the stars streamed past her viewport. Somewhere ahead, the future waited with all its challenges and possibilities. And she was ready for it. Humanity was ready for it. Fuck yeah.